You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the show, people. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to watch our recent coverage of CES Show 2023. Check out all that stuff going on. Today, we're going to be talking about a amazing artist you may know, Stevie Nicks. You may know her as not only as a solo artist, but as an artist with Fleetwood Mac, and I think other iterations that she's contributed to. But we're going to be talking with the author of the newest book that's come out on her life called Mirror in the Sky: The Life and Music of Stevie Nicks by Simon Morrison. Just came out October 4th, 2022. And Stevie is one of my favorite, if not, I think she's my all-time favorite female singer of all time. I've always been just in love with her work and her music and the enthralling ways that she captivates and everything else. So we'll be talking about her today. In the meantime, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn /Chris Voss, all the properties we have across social media. Share it out. Refer to your family, friends, and relatives. We certainly appreciate that. So today we have Simon Morrison on the show to talk to us about his amazing new book. He specializes in 20th century music, particularly Russian, Soviet, and French music, with special interest in dance, cinema, aesthetics, and historically informed performance. This is based on primary sources. He has conducted archival research in St. Petersburg, Stockholm, Paris, London, New York, Washington, D.C., Copenhagen, and most extensively in Moscow. Hopefully you didn't stay on any stories that were above the bottom floor stories. You always want to stay on the bottom floor in Moscow, wherever you stay. He's traveled to Tel Aviv, Beijing. What am I doing here? Hong Kong, Montreal, Moscow, Copenhagen, and Bangkok to give invited lectures and graduate seminars, and divides his time between Princeton and Los Angeles. Welcome to the show, Simon. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me and for that super generous introduction. I don't know who you were talking about there, but I'll take it. And
I was reading off your bio page on your website. So,
yeah, super great to be with you.
So whoever you had write that, I mean, they did a good job. So there you go. But I'm sure you're living it. So give us your .coms, wherever we want people to find you on the interwebs to get to know you better.
I have my own webpage, which is just simonamorrison.com. The reason I put the A in there, besides it being my middle initial, is that there is another Simon Morrison in this world. Somebody in the UK who actually works on dance club music. So
you can hire hitmen to do that. It's illegal, but
the thing is, frequently he ends up being a specialist in ballet, and I end up being somebody who actually does a lot of rave, events. But anyway, so yeah, simonamorrison.com, and that's some pictures and various things there.
So you've written several books on different music, the Russian opera, et cetera, et cetera. What made you write about Stevie Nicks as opposed to, say, Nickelback? Had to get my Nickelback jab in there.
Reminds me, I was talking to this former VH1 and MTV producer, Eddie Dalva, who actually said that we all had to suffer at various periods in our career with certain groups. And I said, which ones did you have to suffer with? Like, he said Styx, but I would throw in, yeah, I know. I was like, what? Okay. But anyway, how I got to this project was I, like you, have listened to Stevie Nicks' music for a long time. She's been with us for a long time. And I was into Fleetwood Mac a little bit as a kid. And I was really into this experimental, I guess, double album of theirs called Tusk, which came out in '79. I was really into that. And but I just listened, and it was kind of like, not off, you go to the office and you teach, symphonies, and you come home and then you listen to music that, you kind of grew up with and you really loved. And I had a conversation with a music editor at University of California Press, and she was really interested in the idea of a book about Stevie. And she raised the idea as a possibility. And I said, well, it's not really my beat to do popular music research, but I'm really into her music. And because during COVID, when I was here in LA a lot, I took advantage of that. And I took advantage of the fact that all these musicians were no longer on tour and they were hanging around at home. Got to go to the studios and so forth, and I actually spent a good chunk of time doing research for it, and and worked up this book, which was kind of, I guess, a passion project, labor of love, et cetera, about her career, and with some points to make. But basically, really, I think, unlike other biographies, I tried to kind of talk about the music in more detail than about all the bad behavior and rock and roll lifestyle.
The rock and roll lifestyle. We kind of expect it from our rock and roll things. She's always been an interesting character because she really embodies a lot of mysticism and just there's something that's cloaked in it. The Eagles kind of have that same sort of ability to write that way with like Hotel California and stuff. So was it the music, or was it just trying to? I know there's a few other biographies of her that are out. Was it just trying to write a better biography on her and something was closer to the mark?
I just wanted to, when I read the other biographies, I'm not somebody to criticize other people's stuff, because goodness knows that's what we all do all day. But I actually wanted to know more about, how these great songs were written and what was going on in the studio, and why somebody who actually generated so many huge hits for Fleetwood Mac and then on her own was never, in the biographies, even the biographies dedicated to her that seemed to be, full of love for her, didn't kind of respect her musical talent. They respected her persona and the fact that she could captivate an audience, and what you're referring to, the kind of mysticism and that appearance that she put on and adopted from various things she'd read and really liked. And so I thought, actually, this, in responding to this California Press book, they said, well, write something that, everyone can read and, enjoy. But also talk about the making of these hit songs, and that would be a contribution, and that would also do her talent, innate gift for melody, some justice. I think that was the kind of way I went about it.
There you go. So years ago, in the 90s, back when bootlegs were kind of half legal, there was kind of a weird Italian thing going on. They had to crack down on them before the Gantt, I think it was the Gantt Treaty. I bought a bootleg of the first album that her and the guitarist did together. That was the impetus for them getting noticed by Fleetwood Mac's, I think, producers or engineer or something they referred to to Mick Fleetwood. Do you start all the way going back to that, or is there a starting point in
I start with when she was born.
Okay. All right. So we go right back to the beginning.
Really, back to the egg. No, her birth date is actually incorrect in some places. I figured
Really?
might as well straighten that out. That'll be my contribution. No, I started because her granddad was a country music singer in Arizona, and he rode the rails picking and singing. And she always talked about how important her grandfather was to her. And so she talked also, and various other people have talked about, when she was a little girl, she actually hung out at a tavern with her granddad, and they do little songs together. And I, in my nerdy way, I got really obsessed with where was this tavern, where was this bar that Stevie Nicks started her career at.
Oh, wow.
I found it. And it's actually here in Altadena. It's not in Arizona at all, because her dad for a while owned a bar. Anyway, so I started there, and then I moved up through, she moved around a lot as a kid because her dad was a beer executive, Lucky Lager and all these other defunct brands. And he really became a huge kind of food and beverage and, kind of corporate executive type. And they moved around a lot. And so I sort of just followed her, and worked out the chronology of where she was and the various high schools she went to, more than one, various middle schools. And then talked about the fact that she got involved early on with this band called Fritz in the Bay Area, which was a really amazing group of kids who memorized a huge amount of music, their own and others. And she joined that group as the singer on request of her boyfriend, who was Lindsey Buckingham. And so Lindsey Buckingham was this bass player, self-taught, and an amazing self-taught guitarist. And he signed up with this group out of high school, and they needed a singer, and he brought her on board, and that's how they got going. And that led them, after this group Fritz sort of disbanded, but was noticed by Keith Olston, that producer, that led to that album you're referring to, the bootleg of the album, which was just the two of them, Buckingham Nicks, and which is a really fabulous album. And everybody wondered, why isn't this reissued? Why isn't this available, broadly? And, you can go and listen to it online anywhere nowadays, but it's a really wonderful, charged album. It's unconventional. Some of the songs are very long, but, you really hear the gift that she had and he had, and guitar really dominates that album. And but the two of them, because they don't get along anymore, had never able to agree on re-releasing this record. Their drama is legendary, as you know.
Yeah, I mean everyone's heard the stories over and over again, or should have heard, of Rumours and the breakups between her and the late Christy McVie and her husband, who was the bassist for Fleetwood Mac, and then Lindsay and Stevie. It's but you hear the pain and the loss, and it comes through the music, and great artists experience these cathartic events, loss, pain, and stuff, and they share that through their art with us, and we find a resonance in that in our own lives and our own losses. And I mean, you kind of can look at that music and go, Rumours may not have been so great if it hadn't been for all the personal strife going on, maybe.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that was their kind of double bind. I can't personally imagine when you're in these intense relationships. In that band, they moved around. They had each other as boyfriend, girlfriend, and then other people in the crew, And then when these things broke up, as they did with young people, those things are very volatile and volcanic, and yet they were contracted to be in a studio together, and it must have been terrible at times. As much as it sounds like so much fun, all of them in the bed together. I know that from talking to Ken Calais, was the producer of Rumours, and he can't listen to Rumours because he said, which is astonishing to me, he said, I can't listen to that record. He said, I might put my whole life into that record. 6,000 hours, 6,000 hours. And he just said that there were times when Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham would be at each other's throats. Jeez. And then they'd have to go into the studio to sing, you were loving you. And likewise, and this went around and around. So they had to put on this kind of game face. And yet, as you point out, it's like there's this old joke about like 19th century music that's like songs that are ironic and making fun of people's sadness and sentiment, but somehow the pain is still there and the pain is still real.
Yeah.
That I think is the interesting thing about Rumours. It's a lot of, go your own way, kind of FU kind of songs. And that's a big power anthem. We get that. But then a lot of the dreams, that accidental masterpiece, all of these other songs really come from a place of, I don't know if you can say melancholia but deep sorrow, sure. And a lot of regret. And then it's, famously, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks broke up pretty early on as a couple. They were not with each other during Rumours, really, and and they weren't with each other, but they still had this incredible bond of growing up together and going to high school together and learning music together that kind of pulls them together, even though there's just such fundamental differences in their personalities.
And kind of through your whole life. Like most people don't go through, it shaped their whole life. I mean, the song Landslide is, largely about them, and seeing some of their solo performances or the performance they've done of it are really beautiful. And so they're kind of tied together through history. It's a really interesting kind of love story, romance story, breakup story. Still love someone, throughout your whole life, or you kind of have to, because I can't imagine being an engineer on that project and being like, you see a huge fight where like you mentioned, they're at each other's throat, and you're like, hey, can you guys go in the studio? We need a cut of some lyrics, some background. Can we all do that now? Are you done fighting? We need to get along for 5 minutes while I cut this.
It was literally that. It's like, get back in there, I think, at times. And if you don't have the motivation, here's a little bit of, magic,
Coke.
Yeah, magic bump.
Gotta love the 70s. There you go.
Yeah,
You
the
mentioned
70s were when cocaine was thought to be totally healthy for you.
there you go. Well, it has vitamin something in it. I don't know what vitamin C, but that's for cocaine. I don't know. There's a joke there somewhere. So you cover the albums. You talk about how the songs got built and everything. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do that, and I try as much as possible to. She doesn't remember a lot of her past, but a lot of the lyrics do, and so I was able to actually kind of listen and think about the words she was using, and think about, which tells you a lot about her inspirations and the things she read and the art she loved, and even the historical things that she was into. I was able to kind of really, I tried to find this sort of whole texture of her creative upbringing and sources through the music. And I actually really wanted to, I focused a lot on demos. I mean, you mentioned bootlegs earlier, and I actually, because some of the songs that she really cared about had a rough time getting on record because of other members in Fleetwood Mac and logistics and band politics. And then even in her solo career, when she was working with various producers like Jimmy Iovine, and she was, involved with Prince briefly, and Tom Petty. She a lot of songs ended up not being recorded. There's all sorts of reasons, and yet I found in those demos some real gems, and wanted to talk about those, the sort of raw kind of material.
Wow! And you talk about what kept them from getting on the albums and stuff.
I do, because there are some basic things, like there's a song that ended up on a sort of B-side and in a later edition of Rumours, called Silver Spring, which is a popular song of hers. And, there's various stories as to why that didn't end up on Rumours. And one was that it's about Lindsey Buckingham and he was offended by it. So we're going to not put it on. The other was that we actually need to give all the band members and a chance to have their songs on the record, and you have a couple, so that's enough. And another was it was too long, and there's all, but there was also periods when I actually listened to some of the songs, like the song she did for Tusk, Sarah, and the demo of that is like 16 minutes long.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, but on the record it's only 5 or 4, right, when the single. And what happened? Like, who cut it, and what was lost, if anything? And so I tried to sort of think about. She's on her own with a cassette and a hot mic or live mic somewhere, and she records it. She writes out all this poetry, and it's maybe simpler music. It's not produced with 24, 48 tracks as it would be. But what is going on musically there that gets changed in the studio and gets kind of commercialized or put into this beautiful kind of applesauce harmonized kind of sound. So I was interested in that process as well. So I tried. In answer to your question,
were you able to get any interviews with her or anything like that?
What I did with her was I actually started. I heard that she has a really tight circle.
Yeah.
And so it would be kind of pointless. But nonetheless, I persisted. What I did was I contacted. By chance, I actually met somebody who was close friends with her manager, Howard Kaufman, who's now dead. But long time. And through that person got a hold of Karen Johnston, who's Stevie's day-to-day person. And what I decided to do was just tell them that I'm going to write this book. I'm not interested in actually talking and interviewing and harassing you. I'm not going to do that. I'm writing an appreciation, but I will send you the material just to show you the kind of book it is. And just to sort of show that it was on the up and up, and it wasn't going to be gossipy, because what my understanding was from their side was that because of the ways in which some of the bad things that happened were turned into kind of tabloid stuff, some of the muckraking journalism, and the fact that she, in terms of her troubles, has given lots of interviews about those. They were very I think the idea was they'd been burned by other writers. So my approach was actually the back end. It's like, look, I'll find out all of this stuff about your upbringing and send it to you. So that was my project, was back end. And then just sort of sending material as it went along and not expecting anything. And also realizing that because, like all of us, I mean, I don't remember very much of my teen years and earlier, and that a lot of that stuff is forgotten or misremembered, and things get confused. That maybe I would just actually go at it as a kind of more, archaeological kind of project, and actually dig up things and present them to her, and actually just sort of try and earn the respect or trust, I guess, through actually showing that this was actually, again, an appreciation. Initially, there was a freak out from that side about the fact that, oh, he's a music prof, so he's gonna like come down on the fact that she doesn't have music education, right? But historically, all the greatest musicians are actually people who don't come out of conservatories and so forth. Right?
Isn't that interesting?
Paul McCartney, Jeff Lynne of ELO doesn't read music. Neither does Paul McCartney. Neither do a lot of the people that actually composed music before music notation existed.
Wow.
they didn't read music either. Anyway, so I, my sense is like some people have uncanny musical gifts, and irrespective of whether they can name chords and do that sort of stuff. And let's see, what I can do to sort of try and bring that out in this text.
There you go. Hi, folks. Chris Voss here with a little station break. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. We'll resume here in a second. I'd like to invite you to come to my coaching, speaking, and training courses website. You can also see our new podcast over there at chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Over there, you can find all the different stuff that we do for speaking engagements if you'd like to hire me, training courses that we offer, and coaching for leadership, management, entrepreneurism, podcasting, corporate stuff. With over 35 years of experience in business and running companies as CEO, I think I can offer a wonderful breadth of information and knowledge to you, or anyone that you want to invite me to for your company. Thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you listening to the show, and be sure to check out chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Now back to the show. So you've given me a new mission. I got to go find all these demos of hers. I'm obsessed. I have a ton of singles. I think a ton of bootlegs that I bought in the 90s. I used to buy like all those things back in the 90s. We've touched on Tusk. Tusk was an interesting thing it was interesting from all sorts of aspects. Let's talk a little bit about that. One of my favorite tracks of Fleetwood Mac is Tusk. I don't know why I love it, but I just love it. And of course, Sarah, what a timepiece signature sort of song for her.
Yeah, so Tusk is a great track. I mean, I love it too. And actually, when I got that record, that was the single. Sarah came along later, and that was the one song. Like when I sat around with my rock and roll friends, like, okay, what is this kind of like easy listening or weird record? This is a song. This is a track we can get into. And the Tusk that was actually something that they used as a set break when Fleetwood Mac was on tour. Mick Fleetwood would just get that going, that pattern going.
Wow.
And so he had it kicking around. And what they decided to do was kind of fascinatingly for this record, generated, twice as much music as is on that album. And they decided to actually work that up into a kind of set break. And one of the things that Mick Fleetwood got interested in was actually bringing in, turning it into a kind of outdoor sort of marching tune. And so they literally, when the Dodgers were out of town, they actually booked Dodger Stadium here and worked with the Superior Marching Band in Los Angeles, which is USC Trojans rather than the UCLA group. And in a hot afternoon, they had the band sort of strutting around, and you see Stevie there twirling a baton in the video of the making of it, and they're all drinking Heineken at 1 p.m. And John McVie's out of town. He was in Hawaii, so they just had a picture of him there. and they literally have a cardboard cut out of him there. And actually, they just had the band march around, and because Lindsey Buckingham is a very good harmonicer, he actually wrote up the chords for them to actually play over and over again, and they recorded that multiple times and then mixed it into this song that had this kind of primitive vibe, and it was a song that it's got a raunchy undertone, and Tusk, it's a reference to the male member. And
I did not know that.
yeah.
I learned
So
something.
that actually offended the Christine and Stevie. We were not happy about the title of that record.
Wow.
Tusk. And you notice they put on the cover, there's that white dog is barking. That was belonged to the producer, that dog on the cover. And they meant to make it kind of look like the White Album in terms of its weird experimental nature. But that one track was kind of the lads track, if you will. And
wow.
And you know, obviously it's the second last song on the record, and before Christine McVie's final track comes on. And it was the single, and it was something that presented them with a problem on tour because of the fact that it required marching band. They had a hard time, like people wanted to hear that track, and you know, how are you going to do it? It's like Queen doing Bohemian Rhapsody live, you know.
Yeah,
a real problem. Yeah, and then you know, Tusk, you know, nowadays it's hard to believe this, but because Rumours sold like 40 million copies quickly, and because it was such a huge seller that it graced the annual report of Warner, you know, they put that was there. And so they had, you know, they threw all this money at the band to kind of do the sequel to Rumours, which wasn't going to happen with Lindsey Buckingham in his space he was, and the other members kind of splintering. And Tusk only sold 4 million copies, and that was considered a bust.
Wow.
You know? And 4 million is massive, but you know, given that what they were expecting, and I think that the one thing I heard about many times is when they turned in Tusk, you know, here's the record, here are the tapes, to the executives, they literally like screaming and pulling out their hair because, you know, where's the hit, where's the single, and so forth. And then the other problem Tusk had is one of the radio stations in LA decided to, the minute it came out, play the whole album without commercial break.
Wow.
So every kid in town could just record it on their cassette player and not buy the record.
Well, you know, one of the other interesting things about that album was at the time, it was one of the most highest cost produced albums. I believe 1 to 2 million were the costs on it. And it was extraordinary I think they were building their own fucking studio at one point. And
they renovated Village. I went there to see Stevie Nicks' bathroom. She has her own bathroom here and Village Studios. This is here just on the edge of Santa Monica, and apparently they have Christmas parties and things, and you know, and people love to use that bathroom because it's Stevie Nicks. So they renovated the studio. They put in zebra.
Does it have a mirror sink? There's just a joke there. Does it come with razor blades and a mirror sink? I don't know.
It's sparkly, and it actually has two toilets.
I love you, Stevie. I'm not making fun of you.
No.
We've all done it.
And it has Mick Fleetwood sort of armchair, and it's got the zebra wood for acoustics. The whole thing is very cool, and it's a wonderful, wonderful studio with a great history to it. All sorts of amazing albums were done in there, and yeah, they renovated this space. And you know, they had the catering for, you know, all of the fineries they desired, and private planes and all of that stuff. But you know, in the end, despite all of that being sunk into production, Lindsey Buckingham kind of did a lot of that album at home. You know, he kind of just retreated from the band, and he would do weird stuff. Like he played some of the drum sounds, and he'd go in his bathroom and just whack things. He wanted that resonance, and he lay on the line on his back and shouted himself hoarse and did all sorts of strange things. I mean, he got into a really bad kind of place making that record, and so it was hard, I think, to assemble for the producers. You know, there were songs that ended up on other records that they did a kind of Beach Boys like song called Farmer's Daughter, which seems to be on the live album of Fleetwood Mac, but because it sounds live. But in fact, was something they mocked up in the studio while they were doing Tusk, and then they just added some pretend live sounds and stuck it at the end of their live record. So there was a lot of directions that record could have gone in, and I find it, because it's so unruly. It's like the first track of Tusk is this slow kind of chill Christine McVie tune, and it's all honeydew, and it's kind of got this easy listening vibe, and you think you're going to get sucked into this space. And then the next tune is this kind of raunchy punk thing. And it's like, you know, you're just getting whacked over the head by the thing you were you thought you were actually going to be in this nice space. And then you're just getting torn up. It kind of assaults you that way.
There you go.
Somebody likened it to like a Venus flytrap. It just like grabs you as a listener, and then you're kind of thrown to the winds.
And then I imagine you cover how she moves, kind of into her solo career, and she puts out her first album, and then that kind of takes off, and it becomes apparent that everyone's kind of starting to go their own way solo wise.
Yeah, she was gone before Tusk, and one of the oddities was they knew she was this huge superstar on her own, and that she wanted to be on her own because she just wasn't getting the, I suppose, respect and attention due. And so Mick Fleetwood, who was the manager of Fleetwood Mac, kind of not so expertly, proposed for a while that he would manage her as well as Fleetwood Mac, and she would do the band as well as the solo act. But that splintered, and in the end, she signed up on Modern Records and began her solo career with Jimmy Iovine, and actually then fell into that 80s sort of synth pop sound, and actually became one of the first singers associated with that. She changed everything to actually fit into this new direction and where music was going.
Yeah, it just exploded too. I mean, between Tom Petty and Dawn from the Eagles, Dawn, and just it was an explosive album. Just huge with Belladonna, and then the Wild Heart. It's interesting. So you talk through her solo career and what kind of goes on in her life. There's that moment where she comes out on Letterman, and everyone sees that she's put on a lot of weight, and she got a lot of blowback for that. I remember I was surprised by it because I'm a huge Stevie Nicks fan, and no one hadn't seen her in years. And she's talked about it, I think, in some different interviews and stuff. Do you cover that area of her life? And
I do. She was not the worst cocaine addict in the band. I think that honor, dubious as it is, goes to Mick Fleetwood. They all talk about this themselves, but she was pretty badly addicted, and that's not the reason why she put on weight. The reason she put on weight was coming off of cocaine.
Yeah.
Some doctor, I think Huron Robertson, that she's never named, and that's a good thing for him, because I think she refers to him as Dr. Fuckhead a couple of times. But wow. He got her, started giving her Klonopin. And Klonopin, and then upping the doses. And she gained weight because of that. And then coming off of it, where she had to go cold turkey, and actually was in a facility, a Catholic facility for addiction. She went in there for about a month, and it was harrowing coming off of that. And she describes that as like feeling like her skin was going to come off. It was just horrible. Yeah. And they used, part of the treatment was acupuncture and various other kind of things. But that's the reason for the weight gain, and coming off of it was just completely hideous. And unfortunately, you can hear the taxing of her voice and some of that, I guess if you want to call it suffering, on albums like Street Angel and so forth. So it's hard to kind of listen to a couple of those records knowing that and to look at some of the videos, even to see somebody who's really really has a problem. And the fact that she got over that, and frankly they all did. I think getting old does, and just realizing mortality, and you need to look after yourself, and that she's now in her 70s and still singing with an amazing voice.
Yeah, an amazing voice.
Which shows you that, she really did look after herself and had some people help her out there.
You brought some to my attention. Street Angel, I like the album, but I didn't like it as much. There was a lot of magic, especially in the engineering and recording, that went on to Rock a Little.
Rock a Little is a great album.
It's a great album, just start to finish. Like, that's Rock a Little is one of those albums, and some of her albums, and I think Wild Heart, and the first one. There's some albums that I've had that I'm just kind of singing the chorus. I have no idea what the lyrics are because the music is just so good. And I'm just kind of blah, blah, blah. I was that way for Steely Dan for like 10 years. I never knew what a Steely Dan song meant. I had no idea. And then I started getting the lore of it. And I'm like, holy shit, this is crazy. But
they are. Yeah, there's some depravity there.
It starts with the name, the title of their band.
Yeah, exactly.
But Stevie Nicks, I never realized it, but yeah, you're right. That's Street Angel. I wasn't sure if they just tried to amp her up in engineering and recording, her voice to have that raspiness that is so iconic that, she has a way of delivering it, and you can feel the pain through her voice more than you can say from other vocal artists. But yeah, you're right. Street Angel, it's all coming back to me is how raw that really sounds in her voice.
Yeah, and there's a couple of tracks that she wrote that are about treatment. She wrote a song that ended up, I think, on Tango in the Night called "Welcome to the Room, Sarah." So when she checked in, she went under the name Sarah. And
holy shit!
And you listen to that song, and it's. I mean, Lindsay fixed it up and made it work on Tango in the Night, but it's really a really grave song. And
wow.
Couple of things. Some of the songs she wrote were about movies she watched during that period of treatment, books and things like that, and very, very painful. And it's like, how do you talk about it? You have to talk about the context of it, and at the same time, you can't sugarcoat the fact that that there was a lot of things that she herself rejected about this. She wouldn't. I think she doesn't play anything or sing anything from Street Angel, and probably wishes it didn't exist or existed in a different way. And so you just have to acknowledge that stuff, and then talk about how, what happened afterwards, and how she reasserted herself and was kind of resurged, in consciousness, and also because of all the influence she had on other singers,
Yeah, so many female artists look up to her.
Yeah, because she paved the way for them.
Yeah. It's you I imagine you talk in the book. What's interesting about a lot of her albums is sometimes they were produced or engineered by people she had relationships and love with. And she was a great lover of men. And what comes through in her music and her writing is she really, was a passionate lover, and she really cared. And so the breakups and, the ups and downs of that, but working with people, that are producing her album stuff, kind of created some issues for her.
It did, and she had a relationship intense with Henley, Joe Walsh, Jimmy Iovine, others, some that we know, some that we don't, and including relationships with people that surprisingly aren't in the music business and are just school teachers and things, regular people. One of the problems she has is because she's a superstar, it's hard for her to go out on a date,
Yeah.
And she has to, she has a very private life, and socializing means going over to, a house of somebody she knows and having movie night at their place, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, I thought about this, and I noticed that the people that she's been with for her whole life and her closest to and trusts are generally women. Girlfriends from the past and so forth, and relationships, it's not our concern to see what goes on in a relationship, but there seems to be a lot more kind of transactional and shorter, like in the moment kind of relationships besides Lindsay. And so something like Joe Walsh's, that relationship with him is very much about being on the road together, and that whole experience. And although she said he had an amazing magnetism, and I heard this from Christine Casey, who wrote a book about him called Rock Monster. And, she was a former
appropriate
adult entertainer, a stripper, and she became involved with him and wrote a memoir about like how crazy that was. And she and I did a couple of book events together related to this. But yeah, I mean, Joe seems to have had an incredible magnetism. Henley obviously is a great artist in his own right, so that relationship you can understand. But obviously, it's like part of it was that she was above them in terms of her fame, and that I think was hard for some of those guys. Tom Petty, she really was drawn to, creatively more than anything else, and I think that she probably, had he been more open to hanging with her and bringing her into the Heartbreakers fold, that would have been a replacement for the whole Fleetwood Mac apparatus. But he kind of kept her at a distance, and they traded demos and things back and forth. But the thing I noticed was that the relationships they interfered. I mean, they're with the creativity in some instances, despite the fact that some of these guys she was with actually really kind of contributed to it. So, Stop Dragging, My Heart Around, or Don't Come Around Here No More, which is a Tom Petty track, was actually something that she might have recorded.
I think
it was about Joe Walsh coming to her place and she's like kicking him out, saying, "Don't come around here no more," or one of these artists, So it's a lot of kind of weird kind of comedy about relationships that are built into some of these stories. But Tom Petty, that was, I think, the closest to a true love for her creatively. That might have been, a different kind of relationship. But
Gypsy's always been. There's some of her songs I've been singing all my life, so I've dated all my life, and so a lot of her songs resonate with me for my relationships and stuff. And Gypsy was one that always resonated with me because of women who've come and gone in my life. And she is dancing away from you now. There are times when you can see the mark where you've crossed that threshold of the relationship where you're on the downside, and it's just a matter of time till it's done. And I'm sure that was her case with Lindsey Buckingham and others. But I didn't know until I think it was she came out, or Don Henley came out and said that she'd aborted his baby, and that was where the child was enough line comes from in Gypsy. Did you find any resonance to that? Is that still true, or was it true?
I believe that's true. The basic story, Gypsy is, to some degree, it's about a childhood friend. And one of her closest childhood friends was a person named Sarah Rakor. And, the song Sarah is partly Sarah Rakor, whom she was close with and ended up with Mick Fleetwood for a while and married him. But yeah, that the name of this child might have been Sarah.
Wow.
That's a story that she's confirmed.
Yeah.
And it's I think one of the things I noticed working on this project and reading everything she said and thinking about it was that and she's asked this a lot in interviews and really bristles. They're like, you've never married and you've never had children. And she says, well, so, but somehow, like, what, have you lost something because of rock and roll, or do you regret anything like that? And she actually, I think her attitude is like, just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it's a bad relationship.
That's true.
Just because she's technically single doesn't mean she doesn't have, a huge family of people that are close to her and various adopted kids, that some of those adopted goddaughters she's going to will her diaries to. So there's a lot of that there. And I think also that, I just think that she kind of has earned not just her privacy, but also the fact that she actually became a superstar kind of against the grain and with a lot of male egos in the room and a lot of testosterone, and had to get past all of that. And I think the idea that she's going to be sort of defined by whether or not she's married or something actually goes against everything that she struggled to achieve,
Yeah.
Which is kind of independence. And so it's interesting to think about that and to think about how, despite working primarily with male producers, only Sheryl Crow is the only exception, despite collaborating with men mostly. There are a few exceptions to that, but mostly men. She's, all about being as her independence as a female artist is foregrounded.
And she probably should have stuck with men instead of doing the Sheryl Crow thing. That's my opinion. There's a couple good cuts on there, but I find that when she got involved with Dave Stewart as producer as well as Crow, that there's a couple of albums at the end there that just seem to be kind of ad hoc, kind of mishmashes of stuff. And then recently, when she did, it's a few years ago now, 24 Karat Gold, which that to me is an amazing album because of a couple of things. One is that she did briefly marry this guy named Ken Anderson, and he got hold of a lot of her demos and apparently put them on a garage sale. And suddenly a lot of these demos were on the internet, old songs of hers. And she's not herself somebody who hangs out on the internet. But
she was told and heard, like all this music of yours is out there, and she decided to reclaim it and actually go into the studio. And she went to Nashville and with a bunch of musicians and record a lot of those songs, including some ancient songs from the 60s all the way up to some new stuff. And that album is really an incredible survey of everything she went through, and also shows how much that through it all, she still maintained this kind of country rock start. And I think that Fleetwood Mac, that wasn't what she was going to be as an artist. Mm-hmm. That Fleetwood Mac was this kind of corporate invention, a kind of FM sound that wasn't political music and wasn't the blues, but was this kind of this chill out kind of suburban thing, California, etc., that she fell into and then dominated through her mystic persona, but that fundamentally, because of that connection she wanted to have and had to some degree with Petty, that kind of was the sound that she was the most comfortable with.
Yeah.
That kind of country rock. And that's what that 24 Karat Gold recent album seems to be about, is that she's saying, this is really who I am, the whole enchilada.
Yeah. And the live album she put out shortly after that, I saw her at JBL and Harman Kardon. Every year they put on a private concert for 1,000 people in a small venue at the old Hard Rock Hotel. It's changed now. I think it's called the Virgin Hotel, maybe, in Vegas. But I saw her, and this was at the cusp of the pandemic. We were just starting to see reports and stuff. And so it was at the big CES show 2020. And so I got to see her and Jesus, who was the opening band? It was Pat Benatar. It was great. It was the most incredible thing. I mean, I just seeing the two of them growing up in the 80s with their music was incredible. But she put on just a stupendous performance. Her voice didn't sound like it lost a beat. She was in great shape. She was so great. And my biggest worry is that someone happened to her over COVID. And so I'm glad that she seems to survive that. I see she's touring now. Anything more we want to touch on or tease out on the book before you go?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful to be with you and to talk about it. I just want to come back to the fact that, if any of your listeners or you want to go and find Joan of Arc or Night Gallery, if you remember that show from the 70s, Night Gallery, Joan of Arc, she wrote, these are demos that are out there. And I find those two tracks in particular, although they're not fully realized, are probably among her best songs.
Wow.
They're floating out there unrecorded, but you can just go and check them out. She also, she did music for an animated cartoon. Cartoon wasn't made. Cute song of the goldfish, and she actually, there was for a while an interest in her doing a film, kind of an animated film project. But I will say that probably she's going to release very soon an album of songs related to Rhiannon. She's always been all about that Rhiannon story, which is a very complicated set of Welsh legends, and that's just one of the figures. And for a while, she actually wanted to do a kind of docu-music thing about Rihanna with all of these songs, but all of that music is written, and I think that'll be just a sensational record when it comes out. So she's touring with, strangely, for her fans and for me, Billy Joel.
Billy Joel, yeah.
Billy Joel in these huge kind of arenas.
The
Kansas Stadium and so forth, the Arrowhead. We'll see how that goes. SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, etc. Big venues. And I think after that, though, I think we're going to have this amazing kind of collection of songs vis-a-vis Rihanna.
So. I hope she lives forever. I was really bummed out about Christy McVie. It's disappointing to see all your favorite rock and roll stars pass away. In fact, how is Joe Walsh still alive and fucking the other two members of the Eagles are gone? Like, what the fuck? Like that guy had way too much fun. And I think
my God. I mean, well, it just tells you, right? You can work out like a fiend and maybe that'll add 5 years to your life, but most of it is genetics, right? So he's lucky.
Yeah, he's got that. He must be drinking from the same well as the Rolling Stones. So there you go.
Yeah, I think Jimmy Page is now 78 years old.
There you go. Is he still ripping off people's music? Oh, sorry, Jimmy. Oh. Let's
Hey. There's a lot of B minor chords out there. You can find them in a lot of.
There you go. There you go, man. Wow, it's crazy. But no, Stevie Nicks, what an amazing woman. What amazing writing she's done. What amazing body of work. Just extraordinary. I could listen. There's something that is magical and mystical and entrancing and all those words that you can probably find this in the thesaurus, that I could listen to Sarah, Gypsy, Rhiannon, all of her big hits. I can listen to those over and over again. Like Rock a Little. I must have listened to the album Rock a Little like 50 trillion times before I was like, what do the words in this thing mean? Like, just her music and her ability to deliver are just so magical. And there are a few artists of any caliber that have the quality. It's just, the question I had to throw to you real quick at the end here was, do you think, she had that raspy voice, and so did Tom Petty. Tom Petty had that ability to, bring that pain through and that suffrage through. You hear it in songs like Break Down. You can hear it in the emotion just comes through better. John Lennon, I think, kind of had a little bit of rasp, if I recall rightly, or there was something about his voice, these unique voices that you can't copy anywhere else. Do you think that maybe that was why a lot of Tom Petty's writing passed over to her pretty well? Maybe. I don't know.
It does, yeah. The blend. I mean, it was clearly her and Buckingham's voice blended, but he changed his to match hers. But I think that kind of, if you will, what she called the sort of swamp dog kind of sound that Petty had.
Oh yeah,
we love that, and that because people who study country music and they listen to those voices, you have like the sorrows, the hardships, everything about that kind of American experience in these tough places built in there. And there's something about what's called the grain, just that sound. It doesn't matter the notes, the words. It's just that affect is what projects. And I think she's managed on one hand, despite being this incredible superstar, super famous, sells her record catalog for $100 million, right?
Yeah.
No one's going to feel sorry for you. Privileged kid growing up. And yet, there's something about the pathos or whatever that she really resonates with her audiences, and that duality is really distinct. And I think Petty got that across too. He too was a superstar, but he never lost that kind of like Gainesville, Florida kid sound.
Yeah. In fact, you mentioned that, what was it, marsh? What would you say called bog sound, marsh sound?
Swamp Dog.
Their first band, I forget the name of it. I think it was Swamp or something like that. But their first band was out of the mud swamp, sort of, coming out of Louisiana, sort of mud swamp sort of music in the first iteration of their band.
Hey, you mentioned Christine McVie, and she was in a band before Fleetwood Mac, and it was called Chicken Shack.
That's right.
In fact, that's a great band.
One of my friends helps run Kobuz, the great music service that I just love, and they put that up, and I was like, "What the hell? I didn't know about this." And I went and listened to a couple of songs, and they're really good.
Yeah, Chicken Shack. Fritz is great too. That's the other thing I'd say. Go online and listen to Fritz. Some of that stuff. You can hear Stevie Nicks in high school singing "Crazy Kind of Love." It's an amazing song.
You got me. After I get off this, man, we're digging for demos, man. I'm getting these demos.
Not on Spotify, but everywhere else.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for being on the show. We really appreciate it, Simon. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
Sure. SimonAMorrison.com.
There you go.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate having you on as well. Appreciate our audience as well. Thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you there. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, all the LinkedIn and all those crazy places we are. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you next time. That should have us out.